You just start.
Okay. Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. When we put this panel together, we had a goal, we had two goals. One is to have fun, and another is to leave people with something really tangible and useful. So we hope this is a great use of your time, and I know we're going to have fun. I'll introduce myself first. I'm Rachel Knutton. I'm with Alluvia Studio. We're a Medtech marketing agency. We only do Medtech and a lot of support. I've worked with these ladies quite a bit over the years. Amanda, would you like to introduce?
Sure. Hi, I'm Amanda DePalma. I lead global marketing for ultrasound at Siemens Healthineers. I've been in Medtech for about 30 years now, across all kinds of devices and therapeutic areas. Have spent most of my time in marketing, product management, and sales.
Hi everyone, I'm Terri Burke. I'm a senior partner with Intuitive Ventures, so we invest in the startup ecosystem. I've been head of global marketing and business development for Edwards. I also was a startup CEO, so I've been on the other side of the table and thinking about brand and thinking about how a company can present itself.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, ladies, for being here today. I think one thing that we all have in common is we've been in the shoes. We've all launched products. We've both done sales. Terri, have you sold yet?
I did a short stint in sales.
Right, not for me either. So not a great salesperson, but I think that it gives you a good experience of what the entire brand experience is about. And so what we're going to talk about today are, what is a brand? How can you build a brand, even in the early stages? What are the most important things about it? And walk away with some practical, activities that you can do. So just a quick start here. Can I get a raise of hands? Who do we have? Do we have any strategics in the audience? No? Investors? Okay, great. And innovators? Awesome. And then service providers. Okay. So one of the most important lessons, actually, Amanda taught me a lot about the medical device field, and she always says, start with the customer. So you guys are our customers today. We want to make sure this is fruitful for you. And we also branded you now by having you raise your hands. So we put you in a category. But any burning questions for our audience before we get started? We want to start with you. Okay, great. We'll go on. So let's just start with what is brand? What is a brand that you love or feel really attracted to?
Yeah, I'll say, sure. Yeah. So for me, a brand is a lot more than a logo or colors. So in my mind, that's the least important thing. So when I think about brand, I think about everything that comes before that. What problem are you solving? What's your value proposition? How are you positioning yourself? What is unique? Are you credible, relevant, differentiated? It's the story you tell. It's the clothes you wear. It's the personality of what you're doing. And that matters to me a lot more than what ultimately is the execution of that brand in color and logo. So that's how I think about brand. And I guess my favorite brand has always been Nike. As an athlete, I really loved seeing Nike so early on focus on women. So they made a choice as a brand to think about their user segments more broadly and differently. And they created a campaign that has lasted since, I think it was 88 or 90 when they started the Just Do It campaign. And they're morphing it right now into Why Do It. But I think that's the brand that I always think about as most motivating for me.
Sure. And you didn't choose the brand because of the logo or the colors, but it does mean something to you.
It was how it made me feel.
Experience. Yeah, absolutely. Any brand that's top of mind for you, Amanda?
Yeah, I'll start with what I think about as brand definition, which is the promise that you're making your customer. And I think your customer experiences that brand both functionally and emotionally. And so we'll talk about during the course of this panel how you define your brand, how you express your brand, how you drive consistency with your brand. But for me, the most important thing is understanding what your brand means to your customer, the promise that you are committing to deliver them, and ensuring that that happens every time. There's so many brands, and I mean, I think when you're in branding and marketing, you get asked this question so many times, and it might be a very obvious brand, but I think I think about a lot of brands, but to me, Apple, I think, has done a really nice job over the years of creating that functional and emotional experience. So if you think about what their brand promise is, I think it's that seamless connectivity, right? Everything works. I'm like one of two people in Siemens Healthineers that has a Mac. They asked what I wanted. I said I wanted a Mac. I didn't realize we didn't support it. But my Mac, my iPad, my phone, it all works together. And to me, that's super convenient and just makes my life easier. And so carries through at home, all the kids, right? Like the promise that they deliver to me is something that I'm pretty loyal to and will continue to invest in.
Yeah, that's a great example. We hear a lot of times when we have people come to us for logo work or even pitch decks. Apple is probably one of the most commonly referenced brands. And one of the things that they have is a great technology and great photography. So we're always like, oh, well, let's get some great photography if you really want to look like that, right? But that's not really what they want. They like the simplicity. They like the cleanness. They like that it stands for innovation and accessibility. And that's really what the brand is. It's not really how the visuals play out, although that happens. I've got a visual here for us. There's a plant. There's a water.
Yeah, sorry, it's a little picked up since this morning. I think the air conditioner is working extra hard, so there's like a drip coming into this plant.
But at Alluvia Studio, we think about brand as define, refine, shine. And if define is the first stage in the process. And this is really around doing the homework to know who you are. And then the next phase is then really coming up with your strategy, your brand strategy, and how you're going to show up. And then finally is when you start to live out the brand. You have the visuals that represent the brand. You have all the materials and things like that. And so you'll notice, because it's a pyramid, I mean, the hard part is in the define phase for sure. I think, Terri, you alluded to that. And I think, Amanda, you talk a lot about like at that shine on the other end, like once you put it out there, how are you going to live it out? So this is really helpful. I think one of the things that we see is that define phase, people jump past it pretty quickly. Yeah. What do you guys see in your experience? Maybe Terri, as you're hearing pitches, you see probably hundreds of pitches from people. Yeah. How do you experience that?
So for me, for any startup, I think the define phase is the most important thing that you can do and spend time on, because it's who you are and what value you're bringing and why an investor should care. So even before you get to the shine piece at the top, how are you defining what it is? What is the customer statement or the problem? How are customers thinking about what you're bringing to the table? Why is it relevant? What is that promise? And how are you going to deliver that? And I think early on for startups, it's important to try a few options on. Like, think of it as your persona and you're figuring it out. So if you have a sense for what your positioning is, what your value prop is, try it out with some customers, talk to some physicians and figure out, like, does it resonate or not resonate? And you may have to modify as you go. That early phase is a lot of market research and a lot of attention to detail and understanding. And if you say you're going to bring the fastest product to market that will save time, then I'm going to ask you how you're going to prove that in your clinical evidence. So saying something is interesting, but then how are you going to live by it and be differentiated is important. And so that's where I think sometimes startups want to jump to the finish line without explaining how and where they fit and why the customer cares.
Yeah, that's really important. I think, Amanda, I've seen you do that at Siemens Healthineers, at Philips, at Indologics, other companies, where you really start with the values, the mission, the purpose, and get everybody oriented around that. Can you just talk about how important that is to get your internal team aligned to that?
Yeah, I think it's the most important thing that you can do. In my opinion, every single interaction your customer has with you is an experience they're having with your brand. So it doesn't matter where it is. It doesn't matter if it's opening a package. It doesn't matter if it's going to your website, if it is placing an order, if it's receiving that order, if they're filing a complaint. Every interaction they have with any individual or any part of your company is a reflection of your brand, and that experience either builds their brand perception up with them or it tears it down. Mm-hmm. And we all go through that every day with our brands that we interface with, right? If your car works, if it breaks down, like that's if you go to get it repaired, is it easy? Is it hard? So I think defining your brand and that promise that you will deliver to your customer is the most important thing you can do. And then defining your purpose and your values and spending time making sure that resonates with your customers, and then training your teams what that is and living and breathing it every day. So at Siemens Healthineers, our purpose is we pioneer breakthroughs in healthcare for everyone, everywhere, sustainably. We all know it. It starts from the top. Our CEO has it at the beginning of every presentation. We keep it at the beginning of every presentation. I use it internally. I use it externally. And when you find yourself in difficult situations, and then we have all of our values of own it, win together, you can look back at that as a team and say, when we make this decision, are we living our values? If you find yourself in a tough spot where maybe you're at a pivot, you have data that is not going the way you want, or maybe an outcome, how do you think about that? What are the criteria that you use to decide your next step? And I think if you have a well-established brand with your purpose and your values, everyone knows to look back at that and to make decisions based on the core values of your company. And so I think it's the most important thing you can do for culture.
I think that the values exercise is really helpful. Many, many years ago, I think 20 years ago, I went through an experience like that at Kimberly-Clark Healthcare in our medical devices, and we identified our values. And you do a value sorting exercise. You can get them online. You can find them online. But really, laying out the 5 key values that I have, it has been consistent. It hasn't really changed. And now I'm a small business owner, so I'm an entrepreneur. I'm building a team. I have 15 people. And the values are part of our employee evaluation process. It's part of our hiring process, because we know usually if something doesn't feel right, you can look back to your values and go, oh, it's because it's this one missing piece. And it seems sort of soft and fuzzy, but it will differentiate you. And knowing what you stand for and what motivates you does help you make decisions. We call it the North Star. Your values are your North Star. And that's something, you don't need a branding agency to do for you. That's something you go do yourself as a team. It's something that it does take work, and test yourself. Look back at it a year later and see, does this still resonate with me? It will attract the right customers. It will attract the right partners, clients, employees, and everything. So I think it's really valuable. I'm glad that you guys brought that up as part of the process. Terri, I'm curious, when you have startups coming to you and are giving their pitches, do you experience any of that where there's a little bit of lack of who are we? Are they jumping to the solution? What are you seeing in the pitch process?
I would say the pitch process is highly varied. So there's not one way that an entrepreneur or a management team can show up. So I think that's important. So you want to be authentic and think about what matters for you and your team. But I think the groups that do it the best are really clear about who they are. They can explain who they are, what they're solving for, why there's a bottleneck or a problem, why they have a solution. Maybe it's a point solution, maybe it's a platform, but they understand what it is they're trying to solve. They know why they're solving it. They know what they're doing to solve it. They know how they fit in the marketplace. So they've also taken the time to think about, it's not just that we have a great idea, it's let me tell you why I think it fits in the market and maybe is different than what the competition is doing. So they have an awareness about what's happening in the marketplace. They have a sense for what they need to accomplish to be successful. And they're sort of an interesting combination of sort of humility but ambition, right? So they know they want to go somewhere and they're willing to drive hard, which tells me something about them as individuals, as their own brand. But they're also willing to listen and hear feedback and follow up.
Yeah.
Because all of that gets wrapped into not just the company, but we're investing in teams and we're investing in people. And so it has to be both. It can't be a great team with a solution that's not right, or vice versa. It has to be both.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the things I think we worked a lot on together when we were at Kimberly-Clark Healthcare was, making sure your messaging is really consistent with your brand. So people think about brand and they think about the visual identity associated with the brand, but there's also that important messaging piece and people singing from the same song sheet. Any examples you have or suggestions you would have for getting people on the same page from a messaging standpoint and the importance of that?
Yeah, actually, I was on a panel this morning that was talking about clinical evidence, an integrated clinical evidence plan. And I think it's all related, right? I think when you're thinking about and Terri and I were product managers together like a long time ago, but I think we were at Guidant with Richard there. And I think we learned how to do things well there, right? It was, you had to define your business plan before you ever started the project. And to do that, you had to, obviously look at the market and the market fit, but we had to define our claims. We had to think about our value proposition. We had to think about our positioning, and all of that eventually turned into the messaging that was approved through our gate process, but also our regulatory teams. And I think doing all of that at the beginning, right, really understanding, like Terri said, who's your customer, what is the problem that you're solving, and how are you positioning yourself to solve that problem? It's all got to work together. And it's hard in a small company, but you can kind of control it because you've got a small number of people. But as you grow, right, think about as you go commercial, you bring people on board, you're training your salespeople. If you have clinical people, it is so important that everyone's going out to the customer with the same message, right? The same understanding of the needs, the same understanding of how you're different, how you're solving their needs. And if you don't do that early and you don't make it easy for people to understand, I just think you'll struggle. Your results will struggle with your customers because everyone will be confused.
Sure, yeah. I'm going to show a visual here about the process. Okay, no one's supposed to read this, but this is a sophisticated branding process here. And we're not suggesting that at this stage, if you're early stage or you're just still growing, that you're ready for this piece. So we boiled it down to what we think are like the brand essentials, the things you really need to start with. And so hopefully this is a helpful reference for you. I think we talked about the vision, the mission, the purpose, knowing your audience really well. I think in defining them, we do an exercise sometimes with clients where we'll interview their target audience and then come up with summaries and some key takeaways with some extra research that we've done. And it does help then feed that messaging and make sure you're consistent with that. I think mapping out your competitors from a positioning and messaging standpoint, not just a product. So we see a lot of competitive comparisons that are product related, but really how are they positioning them and where's your white space? Where can you get in and have a different point of view? I think that one thing to remember is what's the one thing you do really well? That's your position. What position are you going to own in your customer's mind? Everything else is sort of table stakes or it's features and benefits, but like what do you stand for? And really being the disciplined to choose that one thing after testing, of course, and seeing how it resonates with people is great.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. A thought came to mind around that, like what can you own? So some years ago at Edwards, we were working on a product which became the Edwards Intuity valve. And it was sort of a hybrid valve. It was a surgical valve, but had some aspects of the transcatheter system associated with it. And we were in a unique position in that we weren't going to be first to market. There were products that were called sutureless at the time. And we actually were not sutureless. And so this was a project where we worked on it for quite a while and went back and forth and said, what value are we bringing? What can we own? Where is that white space? And we ended up thinking about, well, sutureless is a feature, but what's the benefit? What do our surgeon customers actually care about? And we batted around a lot of ideas. And I'll never forget, I was sitting in a taxi in Milan with a cardiac surgeon, and I was describing how I was thinking about bringing to life this product. And he looked at me and said, so what you're telling me is it's a rapid deployment valve. And I said, you're right. It is a rapid deployment valve. And we ended up creating that category and saying, why are we trying to explain why we're not like the competition? Why don't we just own something new and something different that we can leverage? And that ended up being really important to the customer because it allowed them to do minimally invasive surgery. And so it opened up an entire new thought stream. But it was partly that define phase and then the iterative process of refining it and testing it and trying it on and deciding what might work or what might not work. And if I had only thought about my engineering team, they would have told me all the facts and figures about the product, but it was the customer who was telling me something different and what mattered. And all those engineering things were reasons to believe that it was a rapid deployment product, but they were not the lead message. And so I think it's really important to think about that white space and what can you uniquely own. And sometimes your customers are the ones that help you figure it out.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm on pyramids lately, but we do a benefits pyramid, where you line up all of your features down at the bottom, but then you think about, okay, what function, ladder up and say, well, what function does that provide, that benefit? And at the end of the day, what's the emotional benefit?
Right.
That tip of the pyramid is like, what are you actually giving them, the intangibles, the intangible gains that provides. There's a great, I don't know if anybody saw Mad Men. We said this is going to be fun, but the pilot episode of Mad Men where they're working with the cigarette companies and the news has come out that cigarettes are bad for you. It's such a shock and they're trying to get over it. And Don Draper, says, well, he finds this insight that it's toasted. And they're like, oh, that's the thing. We're not going to talk about why our cigarettes are safe. We probably shouldn't talk about that at a Medtech conference. I think we got that, but it was an insight, right? It was like that aha moment, and you test that and see if it works, and everything else, all the other features and benefits, kind of fall out of that.
Right.
Yeah. Amanda, the process for coming up with that can be brutal. I'll tell you a funny story. Well, two funny stories. I started in product management under Amanda's tutelage. And she kept asking me to do a claims matrix. I really didn't know what she was talking about. I was putting it off. I was doing all the fun and shiny things. And she forced me to go to her house after work and have dinner and sit there and work on the claims matrix. And I was so mad. And I just think now I'm such an advocate for the claims matrix. And I even know that there's a guy from UCLA who's come up with an AI way to work on your claims matrix. Nice. I think the important thing is that what are you going to want to say? And start with the end in backwards.
Yeah.
When you're talking to customers, when you're developing a product, at the end of the day, what do you want to be able to say about this? So I think a claims matrix is actually, I've become a believer, or at least your desired claims at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's critical.
Yeah.
In medtech especially, you have to do it early because for you to be able to say these things, you've got to have the evidence. You've got to have your regulatory approval. If you do it early, you can map out your plan to substantiate those claims through a variety of bench and animal and human testing, depending on the kind of device that you have. But if you wait until the end, and it happens all the time, even in big companies, maybe you have people move around and somebody comes into a product management role and wants to, they've inherited this launch and they want to change all the messaging. And you're like, wait, you can't do that. This is developed with intent, right? Years and tens and hundreds of millions of dollars that go into these development to serve a purpose, and to make sure that we're delivering what our customers need. You've got to define that early, lock it in, and make sure that everyone is working together to deliver it ultimately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say as an investor too, I don't expect companies to have all the answers or all the evidence. It needs to be stage appropriate.
Yeah.
So if you're about to launch, you should pretty much have the evidence for your claims matrix. But if you're earlier stage, I would love it if folks said, look, when we get to market, we want to be able to say these things about our product. We have done some bench work. And so we know these bench tests will help us here. But when we go into our EFS, for example, we need to collect and gather this data. And so if you're really thinking about like EFS is a great example of where like you're trying to figure out like, does your product work? Is it safe? You know, those things. But like it can give you an idea of what you're going to be able to say about your product. And so just having a roadmap is super important. So, I mean, that's definitely the claims matrix is something we did early on with my startup company too. And we had a lot of blanks. To be honest, it was like, I want to say this. And a few of them, we couldn't come up with how we were going to get there, but we left it on there as a way to say, let's keep thinking about this. Let's get smarter.
Yeah, not to belabor the point, but I think working on this define phase and getting it documented and just sitting down as a team, to me, it's the thing that matters the most when, you know, as an agency partner, and I know we have a lot of agency partners here in the audience too, if we had, sometimes we can help you develop that, obviously, but usually you don't have the budget at the early stage to bring in, you know, partners at that stage. But if you've at least documented it, you've documented your proof points, you've documented your target customers, like, it would be very helpful for your partners. You're going to go faster and you'll save a lot of money and time and heartache in the revision process of a finished object. You know, we see that with pitch decks sometimes. Obviously, they're still building the story while they're building the pitch deck.
Right.
It becomes that foundation sometimes.
Have your sources.
Yeah. we have our whole team knows Terri well for like making sure you've got sources documented on everything that you do and, you know, references. And so we're pretty passionate about that too. Yeah. It's just like where you're getting your data.
Yeah, but I think that's an important part of how you show up with your brand when you're even pitching to investors, right? So if you're showing market data, I'm going to ask you how you got your data and how you calculated your market size. So you've got to know your numbers. But if you've got your sources there, and I can see you pulled from the New England Journal of Medicine and the Jack paper, I'm going to look at you and say, okay, you've done some work. You've thought about this. So there's a credibility aspect to how you build your brand and how you build your messaging as well.
Yeah.
So yes, sources matter.
Yes, sources matter. You know, you can tell I'm a big fan of these two ladies, but one thing that Amanda has always said is, you know, plan your work and work your plan. And I think that's probably one of the biggest rules of good branding is consistency. And Amanda, would you talk a little bit about like having a good plan and being consistent with that?
Okay, so I said this in the panel earlier, but I still say it to my teams. My dad was in the Air Force and then the FAA and always made us plan our work and work our plan when we were kids, prom, whatever. But he ended up ultimately being deputy director of air traffic and putting all the planes on the ground on 9/11, and actually came into Guidant to talk to us about the important plan your work and work your plan, but showed how they had plans for pulling airplanes down safely, and then how they were able to execute that. And that was for our drug-eluting stent program that we were on like 20-something years ago. But it's something that stuck with me because, and somebody asked me in an interview question once, what do you think is more important, the strategy or the execution? And I said, they're both important. I honestly don't think one is more important than the other. I think if you have a strategy and you can never execute, great, you're really smart, but you're not delivering to the customer. If you don't have a strategy and you just run like crazy to execute, you're also not going to be successful. So I think with my teams, when I think about our brand, when I think about our messaging, we start, and I literally have it in slides because I think people like to be busy, right? It feels good to make a social post and to, you know, go make a beautiful, everybody thinks marketing is brochures and it drives me crazy. But it feels good, right? When you can make a pretty asset that really looks great and it shows off your solution but if you don't back that up to what is the value proposition that you're delivering, you know, how are you positioning yourself with your target customer? How are you consistently messaging it? Because it takes, 16, 17 impressions for something to stick with someone. They're going to see a pretty picture, but they will not remember it. They will not remember what you do, why you're important, and they're going to go on about your day, and your competitor is going to be in there if they're trying to solve the same need and win that business. So I think it is fundamental that you slow down and make your plan, and then you deliver against that plan consistently.
Okay. And I think owning it and working it yourself is really important too. So I know, AI is a great tool, but you need to make sure that you own those messages that AI is pulling for you, and reread them and edit them and make sure. Like, I feel it's a great starting point, but a lot of times it's like, well, is that really what I mean? And you have to be able to live and breathe that to your team. And so if you're just using this as an exercise to kind of cross it off the list, you're going to forget, you're going to be inconsistent in how you deliver that message to the customer. So I think like rolling up your sleeves and doing that hard work early on is important. In a few minutes, I have a couple of references that I have that I feel like are really valuable tools if you want to DIY some of this and learn about building your value proposition, like really thinking about your customer base and how you meet their needs, their wants, their gains. There's a couple of tools I think that are very helpful in getting you to that point. Terri, do you ever work with any, or have ever seen any brands or companies that are shifting their messaging or their positioning a little too frequently? I mean, it's good to listen and iterate, but
Yeah, I
don't need to name names.
No, I'm just thinking about examples. I mean, I've seen growth in companies that, a team I maybe meet at the seed or A round versus when I see them, by Series C. If they've gotten the hang of it, they really can advance and tighten up what they're doing and how they're presenting themselves. So I've definitely seen that. The other thing I would say, though, I don't think we have some innovators in the room, but I would just encourage anyone who's coming at this from a physician or an engineering point of view to be more open to what we're talking about here, because that's usually where the sticking point is in early stage companies, is that the entrepreneur who's coming from a more technical background doesn't see the value in this, or doesn't think it needs to be done, or thinks they understand it. And so my argument back is, you would never want me running your test method validations. You would not want me doing your DOEs or treating a patient. So really understand that it takes a whole team when you're building a company, and be open to this, because it'll make what you're doing as an entrepreneur that much better. So I think about that. And I'll give one brand pivot, which is a recent example. So Burger King ran an ad during the Oscars. It's very new. You can ask your AI agent about it or check it out. But Burger King's had like a spectacular fall from grace, right? They are not delivering what they originally planned, and fast food as a segment is struggling. And they just came out during the Oscars and ran an ad and owned it. Completely owned it and said, we basically let you down as customers. The CEO or president is the voiceover. They're talking about the ways that they used to be. They're showing old black and white footage from how they used to be valued. Now they're not. And they're coming out and saying, we're going to do better, and we're going to get back to our brand promise, which is a lot of what Amanda was talking about. Now, what they need to do is go execute on it. So whether it's going to work for them, the jury's still out. But if you just want to follow a really interesting consumer product angle, like, just ask AI and they'll tell you how they're doing. But that's one where they've had to really pivot back to what they should have been doing all along.
I think that's the title of our talk today, right? Is if you don't create your brand, your competitors or your customers will. They're going to define, you're going to get branded. So if you don't own it, and if you don't think about where you want to play in the space, what do you want to stand for, then someone's going to figure it out for you. Your competitors are going to make up stories for you. I mean, happens at the strategic level for
Actually,
sure.
it's a little bit like your resume when you're going to a job interview.
Yeah.
Do you just hand your resume to the person interviewing and you wait for them to ask you questions, or do you try to tell them something about yourself? Do you tell them why they should care, or what do you hone in on a particular experience that you want them to learn about? You're advocating, and that is the same thing for your startup company or your product. It's tell people what you want them to know. Don't wait for them to fill in the gaps, because they will.
Yeah. And, I mean, we're in a business where we do design, we do brochures, we do, all the support tools once you get there, right? And you'll see that even this list, right? The shine, all the materials, it's like the end of the line. And it's the it's where you should partner with someone because you've figured it out. You can give them the tools, you can have the conversation. Most partners can also help guide you through that process if you need a guide. Sometimes you do, right? Like we have to get out of our own heads. For my own business, I have a hard time sometimes defining my value proposition. I need to run that by people. So I think there's times too to have a guide to take you through the process. I'd like to just see if there's any questions for the audience. I have a couple more closing questions, but are there any questions that we have out here that we could answer or, examples? Yes, Justin.
Can you recommend any books for the lay person, just so when they meet with someone like you or you don't have to over-explain some of the nuance?
Yeah. So Justin's a friend, but I didn't ask him to ask this question, but it works out perfectly because I do. These are the ones that for me I like the first two because they're really around like getting around who you are and thinking through like how you deliver to customers. I think these are just my favorite tools. They're highly visual. It's, it's easy. These are old books. The Business Model Generation and Value Proposition Design are pretty old books, but I think that they have stood the test of time and they're kind of fun to work through. They've got fun exercises that you can do. I love the Story Brand because it puts the customer as the hero in your story. And I think we like to talk about, well, here's what we do and here's what we offer. And there's a time for that, but really being able to talk about what you're delivering and how you're putting the customer as the winner and you're the guide to help them win is a really valuable tool. And they have great, even free online story guide templates that you can fill out to figure out how to tell that story. I love that one. And then I like this Designing Brand Identity book. This has been out for maybe 20 years. I think it's in its 20th edition or something like that. And it's just a comprehensive guide to all the aspects of the brand that we've talked about today. It's got great examples and it's just a good reference. So, I mean, obviously you probably aren't going to sit down and digest all these, but I think they're great reference tools for you to have as you're thinking about brand. So I love that question. It's perfect. And any other questions from the audience? Yeah.
Richard.
Thank you very much. Great talk. Maybe you can just speak a little bit about what does good look like if you are building the right brand and executing on the claims matrix and all those other things, because I think it's really important for people to understand the tangible outcome of building a good brand from the beginning and thinking about, that complex architecture.
For me, it shows up in consistency. I beat that drum a lot, but I feel like when you've done the work and you've talked to your customers and you've tested your messaging, you know what it is. There's that funny joke. We won't say what it's about, but you know it when you see it. Joke. You know what I'm talking about? I won't say the word, but so for me, when you establish it and then you just keep using it and turning back to that means you've done the work up front. It's got to reflect you.
It's simplicity, right? I think less is more in brand. It's when, I guess it could be simple things, right? When you ask your employees, what is your purpose? What is your value? Can they repeat that back? How your culture? I think it's still, there's definitely a tangible piece to it, right? The way you show up and the way customers recognize you. I think there's still a lot of intangibles in the result as well, in terms of your culture, the way that you engage with customers, the way your teams embody, I think, the brand and represent that brand, every day to your customers.
I would say from a startup point of view, if you're doing this well and you're refining it as you go and you're continuing to raise rounds of capital, I would hope that the capital you're raising becomes easier to attract because you're telling a story that resonates and you're showing up at each stage with a value inflection point. You're bringing more data, you're bringing more evidence, you're refining what you think. The customers that you're targeting are out there starting to talk about you. They're whispering in the ears of hopefully the strategics that want to acquire you. So it's playing out in a way that people can see you're delivering on what you say you're going to do, and it's consistent, and you're bringing something forward that matters in the marketplace.
And I think, the visual identity wraps that all up, right? So the visual identity that you come up with and how you come across in all the deliverables and your website and your logo and all of that will reflect that brand process that you've gone through. And honestly, people who are experts at doing that can help define that for you and help find, like, here's what will really convey that message, because the visual piece of it is like an emotional experience that people have with you, and so it expresses the intangible part of your brand promise. So I think it comes out to in how you package, and the entire package, as we know from Apple, is from the box to the ad. So it all
20 seconds.
I know I got 20 seconds. So we wanted to share with you, if you want to send me a connection, a message in LinkedIn, we're putting together a brand foundation toolkit, which is what we use to walk people through. And so if you want to use that yourself, we're happy to just share that with you as a resource. And if we can answer any other questions, we're happy to do that as well. Thank you guys for your time today. Yeah. Thank you for this patient.